What is going on, everybody? I wouldn't even really say, I always say exciting, so I don't think I can necessarily say that. Probably something that a lot of people are curious about. I did just get out of seeing The Strangers Chapter 1, which I wouldn't say was like on my anticipated list, but I was super curious about this title going into 2024, hearing about them wanting to reboot The Strangers. I think I maybe saw some promotional posters. Again, as usual, I do not watch trailers, so I did not watch a trailer for this in any way. I didn't see it pre-roll before any movie, nothing like that. So I went in completely blind. Now let me preface, I had only seen the original Strangers 3 months ago. I think I may have watched it a long, 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 long time ago, way, way back because when I rewatched it a few months ago, some things seemed familiar, but it's been that long. I probably might have even seen it around the time that it came out in 2008. But this is a reboot. I wouldn't even necessarily say remake. There are some homages throughout sprinkled in, but I would call it more of like a soft core reboot. Um, which is kind of where some of my problems lie with what it does. I always like to preface all of my reviews. I go in open, honest, and with an open mind anytime I watch anything, and I grade it for what it does, not for what I want it to do and what it doesn't do. So that actually is kind of a part of this that I struggled while I was watching it because it's like, well, the original did it like this. Well, why did it need to be remade? Like you didn't do this much better, you know? But before I get into that, to give you a little bit of, I took some notes for this one. So this is a planned trilogy by Rennie Harlin, and he's actually got quite the filmography under his belt. He did Die Hard 2, he did Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, Deep Blue Sea, Cliffhanger, which a lot of people got introduced to because it does have a 4K out. Long Kiss Goodnight, The Covenant, just to name a few, and Devil's Pass, which I had actually seen, and The Misfits was one from a few years ago. I remember some people talking about. I think it's got Pierce Brosnan in it. Yes, it does, and Tim Roth. So he's not an amateur filmmaker. He's got some good things under there. And I would like to give him the fair nod of the hat. You know, the guy that did the original Strangers really hasn't done much since. So anyways, to get into this, you follow this couple. It kind of just starts kind of how a lot of movies at the turn of the decade started, I like to compare it to, and I'm not really going to get into spoilers, but just kind of give you a play-by-play analysis. But it starts out, kind of think of like Friday the 13th reboot, if you've seen that, where it's like not really balls to that movie is balls to the wall at the beginning, but it gives you some of the what you've already been wanting from the moment you sat down. It gives it to you the moment you sit down. And then then it transitions to, oh, happy day, whatever's going on. Here's the main characters, la la la. It's pretty cliche. There is something, this is, I guess, mild spoiler, so skip ahead 30 seconds, that I wanted to give it a really big tip of the hat for doing. There's like this really cool part. It's just the opening title sequences, and it says like there's a murder or like a violent crime that happens in America every 26.3 seconds. And then it just keeps focusing on the car that we're about to get into to meet our main characters. And then it says there's been 7 since you've sat down to watch this movie. And I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. It's very tiny. Now, let me preface this. I've been going through a massive tirade on trying to find the worst horror series of all time for the YouTube channel. And I think I found it in Children of the Corn, spoiler alert. And I was just dying to have a mediocrely, it could have been somewhat bad movie, a slasher. So I was so excited going into this. And I don't think it really hindered my experience. But, anyways, to get back to it, I was really looking forward to it after that title sequence. It's like, okay, we got something, but then it gets very generic slasher there for, I'd say, post 2010s, turn of of this decade, and it drags on so fucking much. Like that, I would have to say the first third of this movie just really gets in its own way, because the very original Strangers, and again, it's really hard to not compare it whenever the freaking original one only came out 16 years ago. Like, this could have just been a sequel. Like, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that before I give that my end of review thoughts. This could have just been a freaking sequel. There was no reason for most of what's in here for it to be. a reboot, this. They could have just introduced the characters, done what they wanted to do. Fuck, they could have even called it something completely different. Now, it would probably would have been called a slight ripoff or an homage at worst. But anyways, it starts getting a little bit in there, around the 40-minute mark. It really does take that long for the movie to pick up. But I mean, I wasn't miserable. I'm not here to bash on this movie. I did not hate it. I did not dislike it, but I didn't love it either. I kind of got that typical slashers, kind of reminded me of some of the early 2010 slashers with that 2020 cilantro sprinkled over. And then it kind of tries to replicate but be slightly different to the original Strangers. But see, that's where my problems start to lie. Now, this movie does open up a little bit more than the claustrophobic feeling that you get, but there are just some really big issues that this movie does have. Like, you're remaking what I would consider a classic out of the dark era of the horror age, and what you give me doesn't do in any way anything better. There's nothing better in this than what the original one did. The original one is wholly better in every way, shape, and form. Hands down. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It just is. That's just facts. And I mean, if somebody goes and sees this and thinks did better, I adore that for you. But I really do think that it'd be hard to try to say this does anything really better. Now, it has its own moments where it really, really shines. The main characters, while again, I don't think are as good as the ones in the original one, I think they stand on their own and have their own merit. That's a beautiful part of this. I think they're really cool. And they even really kind of have this evolution to them throughout the movie because of what they go through. I do want to give a big tip of the hat to the last 10 minutes. It was pretty tense. I liked it. The way I felt about this movie is like one of those movies, like very like, and not like it's such a horrible example, but the House of the Devil by Ty West. I don't know why I struggled for that. Where it's super slow burn and you could easily fall asleep watching it, but the last 10, 15 minutes of House of the Devil is just so batshit crazy. It just makes up for everything. And I love that movie because of the last 15 minutes of it, the payoff. This isn't on that level, but I was already invested enough because I like this world. I like the characters that they gave me enough to care about what happens at the end. And I found it kind of heart wrenching what happens. That's not really a spoiler or anything like that. It kind of takes you for a little bit of a curveball at the end. Now, I do want to say I am kind of excited for the next two. It does leave it very open for what I'm kind of excited to see what they do. I think that's really the only thing that can really, really kind of justify this being a thing since it's announced as a three-part trilogy. I'm only getting a third of the story, essentially. It even says to be continued towards the very tail end of the end of the movie. And it's like, okay, is this one of those ones that's going to end up aging better when the third one comes out and you can watch it? Is the second one going to be better? Is the third one going to be the best? We don't know. It'd be really hard to kind of give this that Terrifier treatment where the first one's okay at best and horrible to others, and then the second one is just insanely good, and the third one looks like it's going to even up that more. I just don't see the point of this movie existing. I now again, I haven't seen The Strangers Pray at Night, I believe is what it's called. I haven't seen that one. I heard it's right up my alley, but it just the first one just didn't need to be remade. Like if you're going to remake something, at least give it twice the amount of time that you've given this one. Or if it's a foreign film and you're trying to make like, okay, hey, that one stands on its own, but I think we can do this. Like, I know this is probably a hot take. Kind of like Ring and Ringu, right? Hey, I think we can Americanize this a little bit. They've got theirs. I think we can take the same idea and do what we do. I respect that because now I have two different versions of a movie. I can love it or I hate it, but I have options now. I'm actually in the camp where I don't get sick and tired of remakes. And, I grew up a lot during that era. I don't despise them. Now, can it be overwhelming? Yeah, but there's some really cool ones. My Bloody Valentine, while I think that movie is like top 5 shit the bed moments at the ending of a movie, I think it was really good otherwise for My Bloody Valentine. The Rob Zombie ones aren't unwatchable. I know some people will disagree, but I think they have their own merits. The Texas Chainsaw reboot, star remake and reboot, they have their own merits. Again, I'm not saying they're better than the original or anything, but it's kind of nice to see where technology can let us experience something different under a different director's vision. We can choose to watch it, we can choose to consume it, and we can choose to completely ignore it. That's the beautiful thing about being a consumer If it comes out, cool, then just don't give it any money, don't give it any attention, and then they'll eventually listen if enough people do that. But clearly that's not the case because for some freaking reason we have this now, and I'm okay with it. It's just it's a literal why. Why do we have this movie? And after watching it, I'm still wondering what I was wondering walking in. Why do we have this movie? Like, what is it? Like, you must have like, that was the entire thing. I was like, "Man, there must be something crazy that happens," or, like, "This guy must have really just thought about something completely different." And I hope it's sooner rather than later. I hope this is on an annual release where they give us quite a few of them. If not, maybe they filmed all 3 of them back to back if that's what they plan on doing. Maybe a three-part continuous story. And at that point, I'd be kind of a little bit okay with that. But overall, to wrap this up, the movie is not horrible, but I'd give it a strong 5.5 out of 10. And that's good. Let me preface that. Some people, when they hear that, if it's below a 6, 6 is like, oh wow, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad. But a 5.5 is still like, I'd rewatch this if it was on. I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's not freaking Night Swim, and it's not Tarot, and it's not Imaginary. It's not even the top 5 worst movies, up there in the top 5 at worst I've seen this year. I think some people might like it more than others, and I think other people are gonna absolutely despise this movie. I think it's just gonna be too slow and really doesn't have a warranted existence. So without further ado, guys, that is gonna wrap up my The Strangers Chapter 1 review. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. As we always like to say, stay tuned for the next video. Thank you guys.